right, so today I'm going to be talking about our presentation, Material Engagement and the Japanese American Incarceration Experience at Amache. And in this, we're reflecting on some recent survey data that we collected to help us understand how community members experience the act of attending an archaeological field school or community open house, and on how interacting with these material remains of Japanese American internment impacts different groups of individuals and helps contribute to their understanding of both personal history and broader United States history. And then what this means for us as archaeologists who are working with community members on site preservation. Sorry, there we go. Maybe. There we are. Phew. Oh, heavens. Wow, I'm clearly having good technological issues here. There we go. Our presentation today focuses on one of these 10 primary sites where Japanese Americans were incarcerated during World War II, the Granada Relocation Center, which is also known as Amache. So in 2006, this was recognized as a National Historic Landmark. And right now we're a vote in the Senate away from becoming Colorado's newest national park, which is very exciting. A primary reason for this is the recognition that this site has really high physical integrity. The site has extensive material remains related to Japanese American life during the war, and this includes an intact road system, largely intact building concrete foundations, evidence of incarceration modifications to the landscape, and thousands of surface artifacts. So not only are these valuable archaeological data, but they're also resources for various communities to engage with a difficult heritage. So the University of Denver Armachi Field School launched in 2008 and has run biennially ever since. The project brought together three important stakeholder groups. So residents of the town, which is just 1.5 miles away from the site and who are its caretakers, Amache survivors and their descendants, and university affiliated students and staff. These people all engage in various ways that involve shorter or longer term time commitments. So some come as visitors to the field school or community open house, others as volunteers who are committing at least a week in the field, others as high school interns, students, or staff for the duration of a 4 to 5 week field school. From the beginning of this project, we've incorporated a community open house, so visitors could see the work we're doing on site and in the museum. As the number of former incarcerees and their families at the open houses increased, it's become clear that they benefited from a more personalized approach. For example, a chance to be guided to the location of their family barracks or other important locales on the site. They also enjoyed the chance to just engage informally with one another, sometimes even discovering lost connections that were disrupted through processes of community fracture that took place after the camps closed. In 2014, we launched a special open house day just for people with a personal or family tie to Amache. We began with a group gathering and research presentation the night before, and the following day is taken up with site tours in the morning, museum open house in the afternoon, and a group dinner that's prepared by the archaeology group. In 2018, our last field school before COVID, there were nearly 100 people in attendance at the community open house. So through the years, we've informally documented the responses of students, volunteers, and visitors to the project. Many of these have driven our continued engagement by highlighting the need and important experiences that happen when individuals, a traumatic historical site, and personal histories all connect. But we've never had formal data on how the program functioned to connect participants to this history. So in 2020, Dr. Bonnie Clark, who's a co-author on this paper, was invited to participate in an inspiring session or panel here at the SHAs about how archaeology can play a role in conciliation and reparation. So that panel launched a project to assess engagement with the DU Amache project over its 6 field seasons. We wanted to assess the archaeological experience as a whole, while also considering how the experience might differ for demographic groups or the types of participation. And our goal was to collect a sample of data and explore the types of descriptive terms that were used by respondents as a method of assessing how field school participants process and understand the experience. So our assessment effort was in part to prepare for an upcoming publication on conciliation archaeology, but also to help us better manage the project. Our minds were also really on this current National Park Service special resource study, knowing that those involved in the project have a particular insight, right? Into the significance of the tangible history of the site. So in the context of this panel, we hope our findings can help all of us think about stakeholders for Japanese and Asian diaspora archaeology and how we can engage them. So to conduct this research, we developed a short survey consisting of 4 multiple choice questions that would help us assess demographics and project participation for our respondents, and 7 short answer questions seen here on this slide about the impact of the field school, especially on how they viewed Japanese American incarceration. After University of New Mexico's internal review board granted approval, we sent the survey to approximately 150 individuals who had previously participated in the field school, either as students, volunteers, staff, or by attending one of our community open houses. Most participants were sent the survey using a Google form that collected their responses anonymously, but we also mailed the survey in a paper form to a few older participants who don't communicate through email. And our goal was to sample a range of different participation types and ages. A total of 39 individuals completed the survey, and the array of respondents provide a relatively representative sample of the field school and community open house participants, with most types, age ranges, and connections to the site represented. So to analyze all of this data, especially the long answer survey responses, we ran the results through in vivo to look for patterns in words and phrases that were used by different categories of participants. So our demographic questions were really broadly designed to identify who our respondents were and assess factors like age, connection to the site, and frequency of attendance to see if these were influencing forms of participation and the types of responses that were provided for long answer questions. In the responses, we see trends in how individual demographics and type of connection influences how people participate. Individuals who only attended the open house were generally over 50 years old and represent a range of survivors, descendants, and also community members with no direct connection to Amache. The staff and student categories skewed to under 40 years old, none of which had a personal connection to Amache. And our pool of community volunteers and students was the most diverse, and it represented individuals from all possible age categories, all of whom had a personal connection to Amache, either as a survivor or descendant. So when we asked people how many times they participated in either the field school or community open house, 56% of respondents had only attended either the field school or the open house once, but 34% had attended 2 or more times, and 16% had attended 4 to 6 times. When we started to focus in on who's attending multiple times, we found that community volunteers and students are more likely to return to the project, while people who are only coming to an open house frequently only attend one season or participate in the project one time. So findings on rates and types of participation appear to indicate that the 2 components of the Amache project, the field school and community open house, are serving different functions and fulfilling the needs of different groups. For some people, repeat attendance is key, while others, the act of visiting once fulfills a need to reconnect with personal or familial history. We think this is reflected in some of the long answer questions too. In reviewing these, we noted that community members who participated in the field school focused on words associated with learning and education. Open house attendees talked about ideas of community and personal history, although some field school participants with an Amache connection also discussed this aspect. Although findings from these demographic questions aren't groundbreaking, they do speak to one phenomenon we've noticed. Participants often return to the Amache project in new categories of participation. For example, a number of visitors to the community open house return in future field seasons as volunteers or long-term visitors to the field school. A number of volunteers and field school students have also continued to return, either for consecutive years of field work or in new capacities, like attending the community open house with family members. For many Japanese American community members, the ability to see the physical remains of the site, locate family barracks, and stand in locations where individuals they know experienced this traumatic event help connect them to their own experiences, or was seen as a way of facilitating younger generations' understanding. Older community members with personal memories seem to come to the field school to see the site of their own incarceration or show family and friends the place they had been incarcerated. Younger survivors came to connect to their personal history and to understand a past that may not have been discussed by parents and older relatives. Members of the youngest generation often see the field school and open house as a way to better understand their family's incarceration experience. As we continue to lose members of the older generation with firsthand experiences, the more urgent and important it is for descendants and younger generations to connect and engage. The chance to engage with survivors on the site becomes, in the words of one respondent, invaluable since personal accounts are few in number and those that can really relate their experiences are almost all gone now. Interacting with survivors is impactful to members of the field school with no personal connection as well. One former student wrote about having a survivor describe the lights from the nearby guard tower and how it made him feel as a child as their most memorable experience. For them, the act of seeing others processing and connecting moves a historical trauma out of the pages of a history book and into the lived experiences of individuals they know. We see individuals connecting familial and individual histories to larger national narratives and using words associated with language around memory, lived experience, and individuals such as parents and grandparents who are incarcerees. These responses reference the material aspects of visiting the site, standing in family barracks, or simply seeing the landscape in connection with understanding personal and larger history. As one younger participant stated, "In all honesty, it has lately hit me that I was seeing the place where not only my grandparents were forced into, but I would also have been forced into if I were alive back then. It made me feel a deeper, yet very traumatizing connection to modern day ICE detainees and US prisoners." All of us in this room understand the power of physical remains in connecting people to the past. Providing such opportunities for the dispersed Amache community, many of whom never had a chance to physically interact with this heritage, has been a driving force behind designing the Amache project as a collaborative venture. Although we've seen and informally documented on-site reactions, in the survey, we specifically sought out written reflection on the impacts of interaction with the tangible past by asking respondents about the most memorable object or location in Amache that they interacted with. A particularly powerful experience for many with a personal or family connection to the site is the location of the barracks. As one respondent said, "When Bonnie located the spot where my dad and aunt's block unit was located, my aunt started to cry." These connect place to people, as do other incarcerated created landscapes, such as gardens, which a lot of respondents also referenced. In the context of this site of incarceration, small objects also really evoke responses from visitors and community members and reference the humanity of victims of incarceration. And this comes through in a lot of responses, both by community members and field school students. One artifact many of them call it is marbles, which are ubiquitous in Amache. We've never actually surveyed a block without them. And they become effective time machines, connecting people in the present to children in the past. Many respondents chose items from the site museum as their most impactful object. And this also shows for us as archaeologists the importance of considering linkages between the site and archival museum artifacts. Respondents focused on interaction with the documents and objects. These weren't being seen as static items held in a case, but rather tangible elements of a shared history. And this also extended to the local community and high schoolers who preserve and interpret the site. So respondents reference them as part of the community and as having a central component to their contemporary experience in Amache. The community of people, attendees, staff, students, and local community members were all a contributing influence on how people experienced visiting or revisiting the site of trauma. So from our survey responses, we really see that emotional and sometimes physical responses to participating in the field school and open house. And these are deeply individual and vary based on an individual's personal background and form of participation. However, there are also themes and ideas that connect many of the responses and cross the visions created by the two modes of experiences. Much of this has to do with participants' ability to interact with each other and connect with tangible objects and places. There is community-wide sadness and recognition of the fact that so many stories and accounts have been lost. Years of silence, especially among the older Nisei first-generation internees, means that their experiences were never documented. Archaeological work can help recapture small pieces of this and help answer questions that connect to personal and national narratives. One aspect we tried to stress in this paper, and is really important for us to consider as archaeologists working with an engaged community, is that even as we're lumping people into categories to try to analyze their experiences, improve our ability to reach community members, is that these are people with personal and individual experiences, both in the past and the present. One result of our community work has been to emphasize the individual nature of historical experiences in Amache and also in how people respond to and participate in our archaeological work. By creating multiple venues for participation, we've learned more from our community and been able to connect with a much more diverse audience. When it comes to shadowed histories like those many of us in this room are engaging with, this enlivening of sites through sharing of memories is one of the most powerful kinds of engagement stakeholders can have, but they don't happen without a whole lot of work to bring in the community and create forums for sharing. Keeping these stories alive and passing them on through different generations and across communities is clearly something that the DU Amache project has helped to facilitate. A key element of the survey responses and the informal feedback that we received over the years reveal that diverse range of participants in the field school and open house is a unique and powerful aspect that contributes to processes of learning and conciliation. So one respondent wrote, hearing from survivors live and in person was a visceral experience. Unlike reading or even a video interview, in the presence of younger generations deepened a sense of heritage. So what we're seeing is that when we create a space for multiple generations and various perspectives to come together and engage with each other, really memorable experiences are being created and meaningful connections are being made. Okay, well, thank you all.